I grew up in Kolkata, where during the run-up to every Durga Puja, there would be an exhibition of export surplus apparels. I was in school when Gokuldas first came into our lives. And then, while in college, in the mid-90s, a new company, Vishal Retail, took over an old single-screen iconic cinema theatre called Tiger and started doing the same. So, you again had mountains of clothes, latest fashion, Firang brands that were otherwise unavailable or very, very expensive. Banana Republic shirts, I remember, were a big hit. But the mantra for success was the price point. They were all cheaper by 50, sometimes even by 70%. That was my first brush with value retail as well, and the Vishal plans of Vishal Retail. But that became its double-edged sword. Very soon the company became highly indebted, a bloated balance sheet and bankruptcy knocking at its door. In 2010, debt-ridden Vishal Retail had to be sold for a paltry 70 crore to private equity group TPG along with Shriram Group. 8 years down the line, the company changed hands again. This time around, it was bought by another private equity consortium, Partners Group and Kedaara Capital, for around 5,000 crores. On Wednesday, Vishal, now called Vishal Mega Mart, got listed. Guess what? There was a 40% pop. At the end of day one, the company's market value was over 50,000 crore rupees. This is what I call a turnaround, a Vishal turnaround. It's Thursday, December 19th. You're listening to the Economic Times podcast, The Morning Brief. I'm your host, Arijit Barman. Over the next 1 hour or so, we will chat with some of the key actors responsible for this turnaround. Men who braved COVID, cynics, as well as conformists to make the story work. Gunender Kapur, MD and CEO of Vishal Mega Mart, right from 2010, if I'm not mistaken. Nishant Sharma, founder and managing partner, Kedaara Capital, and Manas Tandon, partner with the Partners Group. Gentlemen, thank you all for taking time out and joining our podcast.
Thank you, Arijit.
Thank you,
Kapur
Arijit.
Saab, I'll start with you. How many times have you checked your phone to see the stock price movement today?
I would guess about 100.
At least it's an honest answer.
Okay, that's good. So, how was day zero or day one? You've been on road shows for months and now today was the big day.
It was a pleasant surprise in many different ways. The biggest, of course, was what you mentioned, that we had a pop of 40-odd% on the listing day, which was tremendous. It's a tremendous sign of confidence from the investors. Equally, it's a big responsibility for the company to live up to the expectations which are embedded in those numbers. Equally, it was very good for me to come together with my partners, because we do that once in a while. And it's very reassuring that you are in the company of people who are totally aligned with you in every which way. And that focus of alignment is something called Vishal. So that was again a very good feeling. And I would say that for a Thursday, it was a very fun and joyous day for me. It's normally a lot of work on Thursdays because we are heading towards the weekend, which, as you would know, in retail is the big part of our weekly revenue. So it was quite unique and great in many different ways. And I'm feeling both great and emotional at this moment.
Yeah.
All of you deserve this, no doubt. But I remember you telling me people's aspirations in India are going up. But so is the income gap. Is that where Vishal comes in?
Well, Vishal comes in even before that. Of course, that as a fact is absolutely true. with the digital penetration going up, the aspirations are going up exponentially. And to some extent, they're converging between the affluent and the less affluent because the access to everything is the same, no matter where you're placed in the at the income levels. But I think at a more fundamental level, we recognize the fact that fast fashion, which you can call fashion in general, is something which is terribly relevant for young people. And India is a young country, so that's the obvious opportunity. But the challenge with young people is that their affordability is somewhat lower. So while we can choose to call it value retail, I choose to call our business a fast fashion business. And obviously, we would price it at a level where our target customers can afford to buy our fashion. So it's a fast fashion business. We make it affordable for the largest consumption group for fast fashion in India. And we are totally driven by backwards from our consumers and customers. So, yes, it could be called anything which means somewhat what I said, but it is indeed a fast fashion business which is affordable for the customers who consume the maximum fast fashion, which is the young customers.
We'll talk about fast fashion in detail because it is quite a buzzword these days. But Nishant, I want to understand one thing, which is everybody wants to address Bharat, right? But the Bharat consumption story is not easy. Why I'm saying this is because the average ticket size tends to be smaller compared to big cities. The sales per square foot in Bharat is generally low. So how do you address, this need yet make a business case out of it?
No, it's a great question, Arijit. I think Vishal is a classic example of that, where I think if you're able to truly cater to the needs of Bharat, which is the right price point, the right form, design, feel, right assortment, then you get droves of customers thronging your stores. And in retail, eventually throughput and volume matters more than anything else. So the reason why the economics work, and actually it works better than most big box retail, is because you're able to offer a compelling assortment to the customer who therefore chooses to spend a larger share of their budget with you versus, whatever the option may be. It could be, a street vendor, it could be, another organized retailer, but just because the value proposition is so strong, it leads to superior box economics. The return on capital, which is 70+%. You look at, several sort of years of and quarters of data. It's been quite consistent, and that's because of the value proposition here. And we've seen this also, Arijit, in other businesses which cater to Bharat. It may not be retail. It may be even a business like Avas, which caters to low income sort of housing, catering to a very similar group in many ways. But again, what matters is how do you design your business to drive the most throughput out of your branch footprint, or your retail store footprint.
Can I just very quickly add one thing, Arijit? One of the first stories that GK mentioned when we were engaged in our conversations was, he said, Manas, always remember that you can afford to buy many shirts in a year. My customer can only buy one shirt a year, and so it better be a damn good shirt.
No room for
Yeah. I mean, just from the beginning, the quality focus, the feel, the finish, the, shouldn't shrink, the color shouldn't go away. Like there was just a massive, crazy focus on, we need to make sure this customer feels like they were treated right.
So for this category, I guess the bang for the buck concept becomes far bigger, far more significant, right? I mean, I may pay 300 rupee for a shirt, but I want everything.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Arijit, I'll just say one more thing, right? Like for many of our customers, the fact that there is a trial room, the fact that they are trusted to be able to return if something doesn't meet their requirement, those are all things they have not experienced before. So it means a lot to our customers to be able to be treated with the same respect that we just take for granted in our
I
lives.
think I would say most of India, especially the upper middle income India, high income India, you would imagine that people would just return stuff in droves. I mean, that trust is a two-way street, right? And here it's no questions asked, right? In Vishal, that's been, the value proposition from day one, which, GK has talked about, which just builds so much trust with the consumer that yes, maybe there's an occasional, faux pas or mistake, but we happy to sort of, give it back.
But I mean, to make this economics work, Manas, you also have to be razor sharp or razor focused vis-a-vis costs or keeping costs at a bare minimum, lower, if not lowest than any peers. How does that work out for someone like Vishal? Is it just because you're not on high streets, you're not on big cities? Is that the X factor to keep costs down?
I would say 3 or 4 things, right, that come off the top of my mind. Location is important, right? I mean, just the sheer focus of GK and team. Like, if I remember correctly, GK, we used to pay 43 rupees a square foot of rent 6 years ago, and it's in the same ballpark
It's
today.
in the same ballpark.
6 years later.
6 years later.
Right? And GK will maybe talk about some of this, but the shrink numbers that we see in our stores are the lowest, among the lowest in the world.
Yeah.
Right? And we keep talking about, that, think about it, right? That customer segment you're serving with very few people in the stores, and the shrink numbers are among the lowest in the world.
What do you mean by a shrink number?
GK, would you like to
Theft.
explain that?
Basically theft.
Okay.
And that's very interesting point that Manas has made. With a very liberal return policy, as Nishant and Manas spoke about. And that's basically because we recognize that when we sell 250 million pieces of garment, as we are going to do this year, I mean, that's a lot of garments, probably amongst the highest in the country in terms of volume, there is a slim possibility that something can slip through the quality check system. It's to recognize that upfront and say that it can happen, although the probability is small. If it were to happen, still we don't want that one customer to suffer the consequences of having bought something which is not great quality. It's just a recognition of that. But despite having a liberal return policy, still our shrink numbers are low, because if I were to say to someone, you would say that, maybe the shrink numbers will be very high because people know that they have a liberal return policy on quality. But, I've great faith in the people that we serve, and we were quite certain from day one that that's not going to happen. In fact, people will respect the fact that we are thinking about them. So despite that liberal return policy, our shrink numbers track at about 0.5 to 0.6%, which, as MT said, is amongst the lowest. Now, this is just to say that if you respect people in a genuine and authentic way, you get rewarded in many different ways.
So you don't buy this argument that, often repeated that, oh, you're doing business in North India, all this shrink issues or, customers misbehaving and, you're going to face a hell of a lot of problems. You never face that?
No, in fact, I would believe that if we were to overreact to that issue, we would start misbehaving with our customers. For example, to reduce the shrink, if I make all my customers queue up at the exit and start checking each
Their bags.
item in their bag, they are not misbehaving with us, but we have started misbehaving with them. So that is definitely not something which I would ever do. As I said, if you show respect, you are rewarded.
Sorry, just talking about North India for a second, because I'm from Prayagraj. I have to bring this up. I go to our store on the eve of Diwali, on Choti Diwali, every year. Okay.
In Prayagraj?
In Prayagraj. The store looks like a war zone. I always call GK, I say the store looks like a war zone because it's just gone through 2 or 3 weeks of just Diwali shopping, right? Our employees, our colleagues on the ground have probably not slept more than 3 or 4 hours for days. Sometimes they sleep at the store or
And
go
they're
home for
supposed to
3 or
just sleep
4
at the
hours,
store.
right? And Arijit, if you really want to experience the spirit of Vishal, go there and talk to our colleagues, and you will see such joy on their face after them having gone through 2 or 3 weeks of just such intense, starting with Durga Puja and Dashera and Diwali. That's the spirit of Vishal.
And there was, I think, if I'm not mistaken, a store opening in Raipur, where, or was it in Prayagraj, which I don't remember which city, which had literally like hundreds of people queuing up hours before,
Sir,
and
वो
it went.
आपके प्रदेश में था
Oh, अच्छा,
झारग्राम
it
in Bengal.
was-
It was Jhargram in Bengal.
So it was in Jharkhand.
It wasn't a store.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
There are
Okay.
majority of the stores on the opening day. We have a huge queue of customers who wait outside the store. Not by design. I mean, it's not. We don't quite like the fact that they're waiting outside. But there's so many people who visit our stores that you could make that video in any store on the first day of the opening. It would still be the same.
I think GK shares these videos, obviously with us
With
as
Nishant and
stores
Manas,
open, and it gives us such joy.
I share it with only Manas and Nishant because I know in my heart that I will make their day. And I do want to do that. They're my friends.
And it's true. And
It really
you
does.
mentioned something about today being you've had a range of emotions, right? I mean, it really, I mean, it's been emotion. That whole journey has been that kind of a journey.
Energy
right?
comes out of emotions.
Yes,
Absolutely.
and the energy comes out of just that joy on the faces of the people who you see,
Correct.
serving our customers and the customers themselves. Right? So it's truly
But
special.
tell me, GK, that I'm sure people told you, कि क्या कर रहे हो आप? From Unilever, Reliance, and now Vishal. Have you gone mad? I mean, I'm sure you faced this question.
Well, it's the answer in my head is very obvious. Unilever is a great company. And I would say that I have learned a lot from Unilever. I worked with some of the greatest leaders in certainly in Indian business, maybe globally in businesses. People like Dr. Ganguly, Mr. Datta, K.K. Dadi Seth, Vindi Banga, and Kasturi Rangan, and so on. But then, to me personally, I wasn't quite certain if I were to not enjoy the legacy of what's been done by great leaders like them and several before that. I wasn't quite sure whether I was good enough to really say that I've learned and I can do it all my own. Till the time I did something which is somewhat on my own, even if it were to be a small pawn shop, I wanted to do it to prove to myself that I have indeed learned, and I have indeed, been able to use that learning to do it absolutely.
Create something on my of my own.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
the greatest joy and the greatest pain in the world is the process of creation, both joy and pain.
Now, Manas talked about controlling costs and how you do it. There is also an element which people from the outside don't see, which is the back end. And that's where a lot of focus, the supply chain, the buying and procurement, all that also plays a big role, right, in controlling costs. How important is it? What's the, if someone says, what kind of a difference does it make? Can you share some light?
Of course. And I will take you through with some examples backwards from the store to the sourcing. Now, at the store, our endeavor at every stage is to ensure it's not that we run a cost which is dramatically different. It is just that we incur the cost when we have customers in the store, and we do not incur the cost when we do not have customers in the store. So we have variabilized the cost. It's as simple as the fact that in the morning hours, when there's daylight and there are no customers in the store typically, or less customers in the store, we switch off our lighting and we switch it on when in the evening between 5 and 10, we have customers in the store. I'm just making it up a little bit. We don't not have any lighting. We have alternate lights on because we need less lighting at that point in time. Now, that's variabilizing cost to ensure that you're incurring cost when you have revenue and customers in the store. And likewise, you can extend that logic to air conditioning and so on and so forth. and the way you think about staffing, because when you have people who are checking out, you need cashiers. When you don't have so many people checking out, you don't need so many cashiers, and so on. Now, moving one step back, if you were to look at our supply chain, we have a big warehouse near Gurgaon because most of our sourcing is done from that area. We move our stock in very large trucks to what we call as regional warehouses. Why very large trucks? Because they are more efficient in terms of cost per unit. In the regional warehouses, we basically break that big bulk into smaller trucks, which do a milk run to all our big stores every day in the morning. So if you could visualize, there's a regional warehouse just outside Bangalore. The big truck would come because it's cost efficient. The stock would get into a smaller truck and deliver every day in the morning to 12 stores. Now, why do we take that trouble? We take that trouble because in the warehouses, our rental is 10 rupees per square foot. If we were to keep that stock in the store, then the rental is 60 rupees per square foot in Bangalore. So we would rather keep it at 10 rupees per square foot, ship it every day in the morning to ensure that the availability is 100%, but there is no cost being incurred in terms of rental, very expensive rental in terms of keeping that stock. So that's how our distribution system works, and there is no put away. In warehousing, all the stock that you keep aside for dispatching another day is called put away. You put the stock away. And flow through is it comes in a big truck from one side, it gets disaggregated and goes out in small trucks. So all our warehouses are flow through. There is nothing called put away. Because by keeping inventory in places which are not places from where customers can buy, you only reducing the quality of inventory or reducing the value of inventory. So that's the supply chain. Now, sourcing, it's always our endeavor to create the virtuous cycle of scale where you sell more, buy more, therefore buy better, which is better quality, cheaper, and then pass on the benefit of that to our customers of that better sourcing so that you can continue with the virtuous cycle, keep investing in things like pricing and so on. When I say pricing, it doesn't quite mean reducing the pricing. It means that even in inflation, you hold your prices. That gives you that ability to do it. So you would see with these examples that working backwards from the store, at every stage, we do things which commonsensically are good from the first principle. So I would not use the word rocket science at all in it.
But Nishant, equally important is the product mix, right? So, I mean, your 48% of your revenues come from apparel, I think 28 odd percent from general merchandise and 23 from FMCG. Is that a conscious choice because to improve margins and make it more value accretive?
No, absolutely. I think it's been a conscious choice from day one.
Yeah.
Initially when I think GK inherited the business, it was predominantly apparel. And given the opportunity that I think Vishal was seeking, it made sense to have a bulk of it in apparel, but also in FMCG and in GM, because at the end of the day, there are multiple customer segments. There are families who are coming to shop. So you want to give them value, not just in apparel, but also in GM, which is furnishings, footwear, crockery, but also in packaged food in many ways, right? Where you have brands who are at a certain price point, where we're offering our own Vishal private brands, at a much, much more compelling value, right? So as a destination for a lot of our customers, it becomes, a weekend trip or a monthly trip, depending on who it is. So the assortment is a very conscious choice. It also helps us really maintain a competitive advantage, right? Because apparel margins are higher, FMCG margins are obviously lower. So therefore the ability, for us to manage our pricing architecture across these three categories is much, much more.
But Manas, FMCG gives you the volumes, right? That's what brings the traffic in the store. Am I correct?
I think to some extent you are correct, right? Like the way GK and team always describe the business is if you go to a typical Vishal store, you'll have 3 floors. You will typically have FMCG on the top floor. So a lot of people who may not even enter the store thinking that we'll buy apparel see our amazing selection collection and will buy apparel, right? But I would say over a period of time, and GK, you should chip in if you disagree too much. But I do feel like now we have such quality apparel, such quality general merchandise, our own brands, that a lot of, I mean, for me, the biggest joy sometimes when I go to a Vishal store is when I see people pick up our own brands, right? And so that winning that trust where you go from being a retailer to actually being able to say people are coming in to pick up a tandem,
Yeah.
right? That is a real step function change and truly special.
Yeah,
Like
and
our
I
kids'
would-
apparel,
sorry.
I mean,
Yeah, go ahead.
our kids' apparel, just to add, I mean, is probably unique in the entire market. And I mean, GK talks about it actually really well in terms of how thoughtfully it's been designed to account for, babies' heads, which are bigger. So therefore side zips, a lot of other things which are very, very thoughtful around the way the assortment is designed. So it's not just about price, it's also about design, it's also about what you're making.
The feel.
It's firstly about that. You see, because we make aspirations affordable.
Exactly.
So firstly, it has to be aspirational.
Absolutely.
I can just add to what Manas, or rather give examples of what Manas said and Nishant said. Today 73% of our revenue is from private brands, which means, and if you account for the fact that they are typically 30 to 50% cheaper than the third party brands, then therefore the volume share is obviously significantly higher than 73% value share, which means that I'm making up this number, but it may not be hugely off the mark, that 85% plus of our customers are buying our brands. Because if you translate 73% value to volume, that is what it ends up being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the only other thing to flesh out what Nishant said, to the best of my knowledge, we are the first. You see, which is where I have some discomfort with the word value in retail. We are the first company in India, to the best of my knowledge, which understands that for small babies, moms need fabric which is 100% safe. We have launched organic for small babies and we've now extended it to kids. To the best of my knowledge, nobody's done that so far. So, you see, that's where I have some discomfort with the word value, because it does mean some sort of a trade-off between pricing and quality. We don't cut corners on quality.
But how did you pick this team to make this, because you talk so much of emphasis going into design, into, the product itself. How did that evolve? Was it like only in the last 8 years, or it's been a journey which started from day one when you came into the picture?
I would credit people like Nishant and Manas for egging us on for getting us started, because clothing is at times seen to be a bit of a gamble business where you trust a few people and you believe that they will get it right somehow because they know it, and buy fashion for the next season and so on and so forth. As you probably know, I'm not from the fashion industry, neither do I look very fashionable. So I wanted something which I could trust, and they kept using the word with me, do you have a codified process? And first I understood what that meant. And then
What does that mean?
Oh, actually,
Codified process.
they
okay.
wanted a computer program which
Okay.
ensures that we buy apparel, which results in full price sell through, right? Without there being any gamble in that or any probability there. And then we got on to developing a codified process, which would be, of course, the people, the flair for fashion would add on top. But we wanted a process which ensured that with every piece of garment, we would be at least 95% right. With people's flair and so on, it would become 100 or 102. But even if we have, let's say, people who all go on leave all of a sudden, we would get it 95% right. And a large part of our success, actually, I would say most of our success, is a result of that challenge.
But earlier fashion would change in season. Now it changes literally in weeks. People, it's very easy to say fast fashion, but what goes behind the scenes to make fast fashion work is incredible hard work. How do you do that? Because fashion keeps changing.
Yeah. So, for example, most of our big stores get new fashion almost every day of the year.
Every day of
Every
the
day
year.
of the year. The big stores. I'm
Yeah.
not talking about all the stores. And, that is stemming from the fact that young people need to look fashionable and different every day. So that's how the entire need for fast fashion started. In India, it has a slightly different connotation as compared to the West, because in the West, fast fashion is also the phenomenon where things have become so cheap that you can wear and throw continuously. In India, we are probably culturally not very comfortable doing that. So you'd find that the fast fashion in India in terms of quality is probably better than other places in the world, because it's not wear and throw, it's you wear it several times. But yes, young people need to look different every day. So that's how fast fashion came about. And it'll continue to be relevant for young people, I suppose.
Wanted to share a story because GK, mentioned this. I remember very much in the beginning of our journey when we started, just out of curiosity, there was a lot of work we all did around apparel in particular, to this codification example. And I think the more you try to figure out the science of fashion, there were examples of businesses like Boohoo and ASOS, which is as seen on screen. And they were using this tool called Edited, right? Which we now use as well in Vishal, which is essentially sort of, something which helps us identify trends world over. That's obviously one element of the input, but there are multiple inputs, as GK was describing, which go into figuring out what is selling, what could be potential bestseller, and therefore then how do you replicate that quickly, in an agile manner to be able to cater to the customers. But I mean, it reminded me because that's something which we discussed, and it's something which helped in codification to some extent.
And how many times do you get it right and how many times do you get it wrong?
No, maybe GK, you should answer that question.
Yeah, you see, you will definitely get it wrong a few times. But then if you look at your supply chain, there are the historical supply chain in clothing works in the following manner. You buy for the full season, and then you sell your best merchandise, let's say in March, the first month of spring season. So therefore, in April, your quality is slightly lesser than March. Then you sell your second best lot in April, and therefore your quality in May is lesser than March and April. We don't do it in that fashion. We buy all our options in very small quantities to begin with, and then keep multiplying the bestsellers and keep killing the slow movers very early. Yeah. So if you can visualize it every month, our inventory becomes better than the previous month because there is more of bestsellers and less of slow movers. To the extent that mostly by the end of the season, we don't even feel the need for doing any end of season sale, etc. So you have to, I suppose, if you are in the fast fashion business, recognize that you will have 70 bestsellers, but maybe 20, 25 slow movers also. But the trick is not to expose the business to a huge risk by buying all the quantity in one shot and then, liquidating 20%.
Make small mistakes.
Yeah.
Fix them fast and write the winners, right? And our supply chain, actually, to the earlier question you asked, makes it possible because our entire supply chain is on the apparel side, is within 100, 150 kilometers from our main warehouse. And remember, talking about Bharat, we serve a very large country, right? So it takes 11 to 12 days for goods that leave Gurgaon to reach our store in Shillong or Manipur, right? And there a lot of technology comes into play. So we have a lot of predictive ability to be able to say, this is moving in this store, this particular SKU in this size. Let's not wait for it to run out of.
We are the only company in the world which has this because it's developed by us for our market, our country.
Yeah.
Because the fact is, in the West, you can't be that responsive because your sourcing factory is like 3 months away by ship. So we can be very, very responsive.
I remember also when I met you in your office, it was fascinating to see there was a French lady who I think is the brain behind a lot of the Indian fashion that comes out of Vishal. Is that because she's, I think, still part of the Vishal and has been with Vishal for a long time?
Oh, she's been with us since 2017. And she's a fashion, if I may use the term fashion guru in fast fashion from Europe, which, as you know, is probably one of the most competitive markets. And fashion from Europe travels to all the globe, including America, Japan, and so on and so forth. And Anne came to India, her first day in India was when she joined Vishal in 2017. So she had not been to India before that. And you saw her, I think you spoke with her in the office. She's as much Indian as at least I am.
And she was saying this is the Deepika Padukone
Correct.
look, this is the Priyanka Chopra look, this is the Ghagra choli that in that film, this is what Ranveer wore.
Yeah.
She wasn't talking about denims or she wasn't talking about suits, she was talking about Indian wear.
Yeah.
And Anne is in stores with her team every Monday, right? Not just our stores, even other stores, right? Looking at what is selling, what's working. I mean, funny story, I called Anne on Friday after the IPO got oversubscribed. And interestingly, I mean, the tone on the other side felt very, sort of subdued. I said, Anne, are you excited? I mean, it's oversubscribed. I'm in the middle of a collections review, right? So it just typifies the personality that she is. She was fully immersed in her work, ready for what was going to happen next day morning.
I'll draw your attention to another set of numbers, which is very important. It's very easy to roll out new stores, expand. But what is also very important is same store sales growth. For you, it's at 14% in FY24, which is, I think, better than most of your peers. Many of them don't report it. But what's published, apples to apples, you're far better. How do you crack that code?
So, GK, I'll take the first crack at this, right?
Of course.
I mean, firstly, Arijit, if you were looking at, the gold standard of same store sales growth globally is 5%, right? The gold standard. And, you were just with Tom and Walter, who've done this all over the world, and they'll tell you that 5%, 4 to 5% is gold standard, right? 14% is really special. It's really special.
But that's because of a low base effect or?
No, these are, you have 8-year-old, we look at it by vintage.
Okay.
Right? We analyze this by vintage because we don't want the base effect to impact this, right?
It's even more than 10 years old.
Yeah. Even like 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old stores are growing very fast. And to the Diwali story, I told you, every time I go there, I come back to GK and I say, GK, abhi yahan pe same store sales growth kahan se aayega? Because, there's no space.
It's all volume driven.
It's all volume driven, footfall driven, volume driven, right? And I think one or two things. Firstly, the aspirations in India are growing, right? People are actually going in and buying more and more. We are providing more quality products, not just in apparel or FMCG or general merchandise. But the second part, I think GK mentioned this, right? Two things. He said we have a multiple restocking model in the store for the large store several times a day. So what they've done very amazingly is all the stock that used to be occupying 20% of the store in the back, they basically expanded the store so that there is more footfall, more real estate available, and we just do the hard work of replenishing those stores more frequently. And so we're doing whatever we can to expand that space so you can go in and buy more stuff. I don't know, GK, if there's any.
No, that's absolutely correct because, your revenue is capped by the number of people you can check out, which is capped by the amount of merchandise you can display. So if you convert 20% of storage into display space where people can buy from, your revenue goes up.
Yeah. And checkout also, maybe GK, you should spend a bit of time on the mobile checkout, all the technology.
So you see, checkout is a big challenge in retail because if you become very successful, then you need to put more checkouts because otherwise your customers get very irritated with long queues. Now, if you increase the number of checkouts, your trading area comes down, which means that you can display less. So you are then, swinging
Trade-off.
Yeah. It's a trade-off totally. So we have developed these. Again, our head of technology, Karthik MT, spoke about that gentleman just now. He's developed this handheld checkout, which you can use to check out people from anywhere in the store. So if your checkouts are 20, you can have 50 in the peak hours because 30 of our associates are holding. They're a bit bigger than your mobile phone, and they're checking out customers. So that's how the trade-off got eliminated between more checkouts or more trading area.
Yeah. And checkout is not just a store footprint issue, it's also a customer satisfaction issue,
Of
right?
course.
Because if nobody wants to wait for more than 7-8 minutes for a checkout, right? So on peak days, you want to be able to check out people fast, right? Without having them stand in those 4 queues.
True.
I mean, these are great examples of, for example, technology. I mean, people don't quite realize how much technology goes into retail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember especially between 22 and 23, FY23, input prices were going up, right? Across the board, 30% to 50% on average in several of the key, whether it's cotton, plastics,
Sunflower oil, wheat
sunflower
flour.
oil, correct. You didn't actually, hike prices. Many of the other retailers and producers did. So was that something that you had to do to disrupt the market?
Oh, no. No, I would be very honest. I mean, that the goal is never been to disrupt anything or anyone, but in all our engagement with the customers, and we do engage with our customers a lot, we found that the customers were getting really badly hit by food inflation at that point in time, because that was the time of Ukraine crisis, if you would remember. And all the commodities which were getting exported out of Ukraine, like sunflower, like wheat, you mentioned cotton. Cotton saw 100% inflation at that point in time. Now, at a time when the customers are getting badly hit, in our judgment, wasn't the best time to take a price increase. And we did not take a price increase, you're right. But what we also did is that we cut our cost to bare bones. I'll just give you one somewhat comical example to make the point. So we removed the cartons from the shoes and we started tying shoes with the laces. And again, the outer carton was also eliminated, and we used to put shoes in gunny bags, which are popularly called boris, and were shipped from the factories to our stores in boris. And we found that they don't get damaged because they're like leather or whatever. So that practice still continues. So we are not putting our shoes in cartons anymore. While the crisis is gone, but this happened across the board. But I'll be honest to state that we could not mitigate the entire extent of cost increase. I think we mitigated about 100 to 150 basis points. And for the rest, we took a hit on our margins. But my personal opinion is that we did right.
I think
And
it goes back to
Arijit,
the core principle, I think, of what Vishal stands for, right? Our customers stay with us in good times and bad because we stay with them in good times and bad. The moment you take price increases in times when their budgets are under pressure, then you lose that customer. Right?
But now when you become a public company, does it become that much more difficult? Because quarter on quarter, analysts will judge you, the markets will judge you. It's a very different...
But Arijit, you have to innovate your way out of those challenges rather than take the easy path of, okay, the easiest path is increase prices and then see where it goes, right?
Yeah,
But I
yeah.
think just going back to every crisis is an opportunity. I'll give you 2 examples, okay? The first is this whole inflationary environment. Our own brands, the advantage of having our own brands really shown in that period of time, right? Because a lot of customers started saying the mango juice that Vishal has is very good, right? The kajus that sell under the Vishal brand are very good. The pickles, everything, right? I mean, it was amazing because a lot of people, and that's what allowed us to absorb a lot of the inflation. Absolutely. Number one. The second, let's talk about COVID for a second. Right? I mean, if you think about the COVID period, just because there was such dearth of essential supplies, many of our customers shopped at Vishal for the first time during COVID who had never shopped at Vishal. And we track those numbers because we have so much, loyalty program data and all of that, right? And you realize that many of those customers just stuck with us, right? They may not buy everything. Some of them buy everything, but a lot of them now come to Vishal because they got exposed to Vishal for the first time during COVID. So we are in that spirit of let's not go any crisis, wasted.
Yeah.
Right.
I'll tell you a story here.
Yeah.
Because this is becoming too intellectual now. So during, this is 4-5 years ago, and it's a true story. Before Diwali, I was visiting a store in Karol Bagh, and one elderly gentleman, he came to me and he said, are you Mr. Kapur? So I said, yes, I am. How can I help you? So he said, I want to give you a piece of advice. I don't know for sure, but he was looking like a retired civil servant. And I said, of course, I would be very glad if you tell me if you can do anything better. He said, this shirt that you're selling, if I'm not mistaken, it's good quality material. I said, yes, everything is good quality. And the shirt is somewhat more expensive. It's 599 or 699 rupees. It is good quality. And he said, you're giving buy one, get one free on this. So I said, yes, we are. So he said, you should not do that. Do not give buy one, get one free. So I said, well, that's a very surprising piece of advice from you. Normally, our customers love to get buy one, get one free. He said, you see, Mr. Kapur, I also like that promotion, but I don't want your company to shut one more time now. I think it's very difficult for you to be able to afford this. So for the sake of customers like me, please increase the price or do not give buy one, get one free.
It's amazing.
Story.
Amazing.
So you also told me another story that there was a little girl who had come to your store and she
That
told
steam
her mother
iron.
about the steam
I
iron.
know, I told you that.
And that mom, we can afford one, and now my uniform, we can iron it at home.
So you see, we had launched steam irons, which are obviously better than dry irons. And we had launched at a price of $499. And this is a store of ours which is on the outskirts of Delhi, towards Ghaziabad. Rajnagar Extension, it's called. So I saw it myself in the store, that she was with her mom and very bright, young,
Sprightly.
maybe, lean, very energetic girl, would be probably 8 to 10 years old. And she was telling her mom, she was saying, mommy, even we can buy this, $499, steam iron.
But let's look at the growth that's taking place. A national footprint, 645 stores across 414 cities. If I'm not mistaken, 8 years ago, you were adding 25 to 30 stores a year. Now it's roughly around 75 stores. Has the average store payback gone up?
The average, so we track that number, as you can imagine, by vintage, like a hawk, right? Because to us, people say a lot of questions even during the road shows were about sales per square foot and, other things. And we say the number that really, really matters is return on capital, right? How fast are the stores paying back? And, also the second number that really matters is what's the white space like, right? And I would say those are the two things. And frankly, I think Nishant made this point earlier, GK made this point earlier about, apparel only for, we have such an amazing product depth that we have the ability to experiment. Right. So depending on earlier we used to say we will only open stores in population centers above a certain number. Right. Now we are actually able to go deeper because we have that product depth where we can say, why should customers in the smaller towns, jisko hum bolte hain kasbe and, like smaller cities, why should they not get access to our product? Right. So all of that is an important part of our journey ahead, right? On the growth side.
Our store capex payback is 19 months today with the 60 to 80 stores that we open, which is the shortest in Indian retail. Yeah. Basically, it means that if we put X rupees into opening a store, that X rupees we recover from the store profit or EBITDA in 19 months time, which is the shortest in Indian retail. So the quality of a store has not come down in any which way over the last 8 years.
And that boils into the 70% plus return on capital that you see, right? It's all linked. It all comes together. And in our experience, Arijit, and in all parts of the world, but more so in India, right? There are three things that make amazing companies, right? Growth, return on capital, cash conversion, whatever you call it, and governance, right? Those are the three things that make you followed this, you've done this for 20 plus years, right? Those are the three that really, really matter. And we've aspired, and I'm now using the word aspired in a different sense, but we've aspired to address all three for our shareholders and the whole ecosystem basically.
Nishant, you've grown up in a big city like Delhi. You work in a big city like Mumbai. When you were first checking out Vishal, you were about to invest, did you actually go on a road trip and check out stores? What was your experience like?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think at that time, there were about 200 odd stores, right? And between our teams, we probably visited maybe 60, 70 stores in different markets, right? Luckily, Delhi NCR has always had a high density of Vishal stores in various catchments. So I've grown up in Janakpuri, which is, West Delhi. So a store in Vikaspuri, there's a store in Uttam Nagar, Dwarka. So those were all within, vicinity, which, became sort of the milk run equivalent that GK described for goods dispatch. I did a milk run to visit all the stores, looking at not just Vishal stores, but also competition stores, right? I mean, in some ways, we track what is called as key value items in FMCG, which is KVIs, which are seen as kind of price setters in a given catchment, right? So you have to be super competitive on those, the lowest, because they become sort of your leading indicators of, affordability in some ways. That was something which the team, when we sort of spoke to the store managers, the customer associates, they were tracking it like a hawk every day, right? The interactions with the customers. We went at different times when it was a lean period, busy period during 6 to 11 in the evening. The consistency with which, the conversations were happening, the rigor of, the day in the life of a store manager, day in the life of a store associate. There was just many stories which made us, gave us a lot of confidence on how the process is going back to this codification point. Because, you can do it when you have 10 stores, 20 stores, but when you go from 200 to 600 stores, it has to be codified so that at the last mile, it can happen with precision.
GK, UP, Karnataka and Assam are your top 3 contributing states. Now, how different is a customer in UP versus a customer in Assam versus a customer in Karnataka? And how similar are they?
So, firstly, I'll say that, these states are big for some very obvious reasons. For example, Assam, every retailer does well because Assam is very distribution difficult. And basically, the district headquarter towns feed the entire district. You don't go beyond that. Even the mom and pop stores are very, the density is very low outside the district headquarter towns. So the entire district would come to shop at the district headquarter town. So it does distort your numbers a little bit because while the population of that district headquarter could be 50,000 people, and therefore your denominator becomes 50,000 when you calculate revenue per capita, but actually it's serving 5 lakh people because they all shop in the district headquarter towns. So these are all called feeder markets. Assam and Northeast are all feeder markets. UP is the highest population place. So it's again, one of the important things that we look at is population density. That is quite high in UP. And Karnataka is quite ahead in terms of the density of organized retail. The culture of shopping in organized retail is very well established, and we've achieved great success there. But there is no state in India where we do not achieve double-digit same-store sales growth. No region or state in India. So the performance in that sense is quite uniform. On your second question, I would express a personal opinion, but it can be challenged. Retail thrives on similarities amongst people. It has to somehow deal with the differences through use of technology. Let me give you an example. We, for example, don't do saris because saris are very different in each place in India. For example, TN and Calcutta are like chalk and cheese in terms of saris. Now, if you start doing stuff which is very different, then your buying for each of these places will be only as good as a good mom and pop store in that place, because you're just buying for that place. Your expertise fully comes into play when you're buying large quantities. You apply technology, you apply supply chain expertise, you raise the quality bar, you raise the fashionability bar, and so on and so forth. So, for example, we don't do saris for that reason. We do, let's say, ladies' western clothing. Now, Manas spoke about that automated allocation system. While ladies' western clothing is the same across the country, but you'll find
Body types differ.
body types are very different. So in Northeast, you will sell lot of small and extra small sizes. Whereas, quite obviously, when you come to North India, a lot of large and extra large. Similarly, you would find states where the color of the skin is lighter. You would sell a lot of, bold dark colors like red and bright blue and so on and so forth. And the states where the skin colors are somewhat darker, you will sell more earthy colors, rust and brown, and so on and so forth. So what this automated system does is that it is sensitive to the local both requirements and preferences. Because if one red shirt gets sold from a Guwahati store, which is small in size and is 100% cotton and has a collar, exactly that will automatically get replenished to Guwahati store. Now, what do we achieve by that? If the size is small in Guwahati, you get small. And if the color which is preferred in Guwahati for whatever reason is red, you would get a red. And if the temperatures are high in Guwahati and therefore you prefer 100% cotton, you get 100% cotton. So while the merchandise is the same, of course we are all different, but I would submit that we thrive on similarities and we have to take the differences in our stride in the way we conduct our business.
And Arijit, here GK is talking about replenishment. Even the initial stock that goes out. So in the initial, let's say you're sending 20 things to Guwahati, right? That stack of 20 would have more extra smalls and smalls that's going to the Northeast, versus if you are sending it to
Punjab, for example.
Punjab, yeah.
It would be fewer extra smalls and smalls.
Correct.
And all of that is automated. That's the
Fully automated.
That goes
That's
back to the codified piece
yeah.
that we were talking about.
And this is what I was saying, only we as a retail company have it in the world.
In the world?
Yes.
Wow.
It's homegrown, it's developed.
Yeah.
We've developed it.
Yeah. But Nishant, tell me, in the last 15 years, I mean, I know Kedaara came into the picture 8 years ago, but even before that, and GK can also come in, we've seen how this entire retail industry getting disrupted thanks to e-commerce. Now e-commerce has a new avatar.
Quick commerce. Yeah.
So how does Vishal deal with this, or dealt with e-commerce and now dealing with quick commerce?
No, I think it's a great question. Again, I think the business, in some ways, the resilience of the business is reflected when you have new entrants, whether it was e-commerce, omni-channel earlier, or quick commerce. At that point in time, thanks to COVID, I think, crisis into opportunity, to what Manas said earlier, we started, delivering from stores. So, right, we were using the store both as a dark store as well as a store which was serving customers walking in. And that sort of created an additional revenue opportunity to serve that catchment, open up new customers who could try our merchandise. So that was, one example of that.
Was that how it got initiated, the whole e-commerce?
Yes, that's how it got initiated at the time of COVID. And then on quick commerce, I think the interesting part, Arijit, there are two aspects, right? Number one, quick commerce is largely focused today, at least, on third-party brands and urban India. Right? We're the exact opposite of that. We are own brands predominantly and tier 3, tier 4 India, right? Places like Upper Tehri and Jhargram, which I think no one in quick commerce has ever seen yet, right? The eventual competitive advantage and moat is really customers want value, right? There's a reason why they're shopping more and more of First Crop, which is our own brand, or, Pink Almira, or whatever the case may be, right? So therefore, that has enabled us to really, not get impacted by quick commerce much. I mean, GK can obviously elaborate much more, but our stores in Gurgaon, right, which are on the other side of a lot of them on the other side of NH, they're growing, at the same pace, right, despite quick commerce existing in those markets.
How is that possible?
So let me give you an example. We sell full crop chocolate biscuits, which are called Bourbon biscuits, made by McVitie's, by the way, which is an Australian multinational company.
And they sell as McVitie's also elsewhere. I mean, they have their own, and they also manufacture for you.
Yeah, they manufacture for us and they develop for us. So we sell them for 16 rupees. The market leader in that category sells at 36 rupees. You could argue that McVitie's in terms of quality would be, if anything, better. But let's assume it's the same. Now, even if the advantage in quick commerce on big discounting days is 20%, the price would come down to 28 rupees. But if my customers were to buy 10 things from quick commerce, each of which is 70-80% higher in price, despite that discounting, they would not be able to afford what they are buying. So it is a fact, as Nishant said, that to the best of our knowledge, we've not lost any customer to quick commerce. But alongside, we also have a quick commerce business which is fully available in Gurgaon right now. So it is not that, again, there is a trade-off between value and convenience in our case. We want our customers to check both the boxes, value and convenience.
Through innovation.
Through innovation.
Through innovation.
Through innovation.
But is it just biscuits where you see that
No,
price gap, or is
it's
it
shampoo, it's noodles. I'll give you the example of noodles made by Indonesian noodles. Again, not less in quality. The market leader sells at 16 rupees for a 70-gram packet. We are at 9 rupees. So it's across the board.
And Arijit, it's yummy. You should try it. It's spicier. It's nicer. We all use it.
Yeah.
By the way, we are all consumers of our products. Right? We are
I'll
all
send you
consumers
some
of our
samples.
products.
But what about other categories? What about FM, like personal products, personal care, home
We
care?
have our own brands there.
Right, and they're also the
Exactly the
price
same price
differences-
equation.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. If you were to buy your range of FMCG that you buy every month from anywhere rather than Vishal, you'll pay a lot more.
We are running out of time, Manas. I wanted to just step back and go to, around 2010, where I think you were in TPG, and probably that helped you to make up your mind when you moved to Partners that, to make that decision 8 years ago that I know this company, I think there's still more potential. Let me enjoy the ride for a longer period.
Absolutely. So I remember first running into GK outside the Bombay airport, the old Bombay airport, Mumbai airport. And I walked up to him and I introduced myself because the original Vishal transaction hadn't closed yet. Yeah. And GK was doing the back and forth from Delhi to Bombay. And I cannot take any credit for that journey. I was not part of the team. But then
you saw it being
I
in the
saw it.
same
I had a
firm.
ringside view.
Yeah.
And I saw how hard GK and the Amol and the TPG team really worked on it. And then in 2016, December, I had taken 2 weeks off because I had a ton of vacation. And then I just randomly reached out to GK and we had a 3 or 4 hour coffee at Oberoi. Right? It was random. And we discussed everything
Many
from...
coffees. I guess.
Yeah, many coffees. And it was totally random. We discussed, that book on Buddha that you spoke about.
Mostly we discussed that.
Mostly we discussed randomly spiritual stuff. And then at the end of the meeting, GK said that, maybe at some point TPG would be. And so then that led one thing to another. And then, of course, we love working together, Nishant and I. So that, it was like, baat aage badhti chali gayi, karwan badhta gaya, right? And we all kind of got together and we managed to. And the level of conviction that we had in GK, the team, once we got to know the team, the business, the Lego blocks that had all been come into place to build that business, the 48, the 50, 25, 25 roughly that you were talking about between apparel, GM and FMCG, GK calls it the shape of the business, right? The shape of the business and hence the unit economics of the business was largely aligned. So you're absolutely right. Sometimes some of these things, when you've seen it over a period of time, it just gives you so much conviction to say we can go in with confidence, and that's how we were able to really bang the table.
But
and
you
say, "Let's get
started
this
doing
done."
the homework much before you actually did the deal in partners, right?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Like a year and a half before that, GK. I mean, I actually went and met my old friends and tried to do something a little bit more
Bilaterally.
bilaterally. We were shooed away, and but we kept at it, right? We kept at it, and we made sure we had the right set of people around us to be able to do it together. And yeah, exactly.
So I remember one of you telling me that, yes, the Avas trade, you guys went for a walk, and that's where I think Rene was also mentioning that, and that's where you brainstormed and you cleared all the doubts. Did something similar happen in Vishal as well?
So in Vishal, Manas obviously called, right? In Avas, we'd obviously had the privilege of working together. And because Manas had a ringside view, obviously knew GK really well.
Correct.
We hadn't done much in retail until that point, right? I mean, we had done, I think Manevar had happened by then.
Much later.
Yeah, Manevar happened in 2017, actually. So
Right.
it happened a year before we invested in Vishal. But we started building sort of understanding of retail and different categories. But, to what Manas described, I think as soon as we met with GK and the team and saw the stores, really understood the story, and more than the numbers, the story behind the numbers, right?
Yeah.
Which is
The value
always the most
proposition,
important. I mean, storytelling is one aspect of what we do, but the story really sort of is the more important part.
Right.
It was clear that this is something which is, a winner, right? And that's how it all came together.
But how did you convince your investors? Because if I'm someone sitting in Singapore or in New York, I would say great potential, Nishant, but this is a restricted sector. You have, but you still have foreign companies. You also have deep pocket rivals. How do you stand out? How do you make money? So how did you convince your own limited LPs?
So I think the conviction obviously starts with us, Arijit, right?
Correct.
I mean, our LPs
Starts with
obviously
you,
trust us to make the right calls. So in some ways, more than convincing the LPs, it was really about convincing the investment committee, which, I'm part of. But I think at some level, we've talked about this during the course of this conversation. Really large, TAM is serving the biggest segment of Bharat in many ways, right? So there was massive opportunity. We were 200 stores looking at many more in the future. It was a box model which had consistent unit economics, irrespective of tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, northeast, south, north, whichever, region you put. So there was a lot of consistency around that, which made it easier.
And growth largely funded by internal accruals.
Growth all funded by internal growth. And most importantly, I think that the last point is most important, which is the team, right?
Yeah.
GK having done that from the beginning,
Correct.
knowing exactly what works, what doesn't work, the team which had been around for a really long time. I think all those three things really came through both in qualitative assessment as well as in the numbers that, we obviously analyzed to death beyond a point. But that's what gave us all the comfort that, look, this is something which, it goes back to the point which Manas was saying. Look, when you find something special, then it's our job as owners, as investors to really double down, right? At that point, you sort of can't, end up being risk off, right? At that point, you have to say, look, this is where we will go all in. And that's what happened. And fortunately, it was great.
And you get the last word. What convinced you? I remember ages ago you had told me, I'm bored because organized retail looks at the same 6 cities, and in those same 6 cities there are the same 6 malls. So, it's beyond the point it gets boring. So when guys from TPG first approached you, what convinced you that yes, Vishal is where my journey, this is where the new innings will be?
So, I would say that I was involved in the process for 1.5 years before this deal happened.
Yeah.
And
Dealing with banks and
all of
creditors.
it.
Yeah.
Building conviction about Vishal.
Correct.
Because there wasn't anything optically which was very convincing about Vishal. It was a totally bankrupt business in every which way. But that is where the Six City example came, because there was a belief in India that organized retail may not work in India. It's too early and you may never make money. That's the story which I told you. When we looked around, and I was with retail for a few years before that, not very many years, but a few years before that. And, when you look at the role which organized retail played in, let's say in America, it wasn't quite happening in India, because there the societal role of organized retail was to make things cheaper for the less affluent and in a way get consumption going. Now, the Six Cities, Six Mall model wasn't doing that. It was totally focused on the upper middle income group India at rentals which were so expensive that the malls needed to get footfall of thousands of people 24/7 for those stores to survive. And we said that this does not mean that organized retailing cannot work in India. This just means that you have to go back to the first principles and see if you can create relevance for this, for Indian society at large, by making things more affordable. If any country needed that, it was India actually, to make things more affordable and get more folks into the consumption space. And that hypothesis was what drove the Vishal transaction. And I would compliment my colleagues in TPG at that point in time, folks like Amol, who
Saw it through.
Yeah, who saw it through. Absolutely saw it through.
Yeah. And did your experience or stint in Africa help? Because very similar market dynamics, very similar, perhaps similar demographic profiles as well.
See, that was, of course, there is something that you learn from every
True.
stint that you do. But, the fast-moving consumer good and retail space is quite different. Because there you are dealing more with consumers. By what I mean by that is that there the lady, when she's using the shampoo, becomes very important. Whereas in retail, you could be dealing with the same lady, but as a customer, she's in the store trying things, buying things, choosing things. So while there are some overlaps, but essentially the businesses are very different.
We can really go on and on, but it's been really fascinating, to talk and discuss and hear these stories. Today, you've crossed an important milestone. I'm sure there are many more to come. Congratulations once again to all three of you. Thank you, GK. Thank you, Nishant. Thanks, Manas.
Thank you, Arijit.
Thank
Thanks
you,
for
Arijit.
joining.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks
Really
for having
enjoyed
us.
the
Guys.
conversation.
Appreciate it.